life in the fast lane taking us? Well, it's actually taking us to extremes. And what happens when we reach the extreme? We begin to split apart and disintegrate. For example, when we are under extreme pressure, our health often begins to deteriorate. Or when we reach extreme heights, things begin to erode. An example is fame, of course. Someone who becomes extremely famous is then subject to such highs and lows of adulation and of being torn down by jealousies. So the extremes have a lot of baggage attached to them. Another extreme is selfishness. When we are so absorbed with ourselves and our own needs, we experience isolation. All of these are ways in which the extreme takes us to a place of, well, deterioration. Well, how do extremes serve us then? They get our attention. For example, we become too uncomfortable to remain complacent. Life in the fast lane takes us to extremes. So, what can this look like? We actually are working with two different forces, and here's an opportunity to become more self-aware. One of those forces is what I call the Mack truck. And the Mack truck force is one of divide and conquer. It's one of being driven, of striving, of intense focus. It's exhilarating, it really is, and frankly, I often do the Mack truck mode, and although I get a lot done in that mode, what happens is I feel depleted, I feel torn, I often feel agitated, I get too many things happening at once, I start to feel a bit overwhelmed. That is part of the Mack truck energy. The other force I call the Magnolia force. And if you're thinking, Magnolia and force, how do those two things go together? Well, think of the magnolia as very open, very fragrant, very sensuous, very encompassing. It is the force of uniting and thriving. Within that magnolia force, that I call it, there is much more serenity, much more sensitivity. It has a lot to offer. In our culture, however, in our Western culture, we really focus mainly on what drives, what moves, what's pounding forward, and we lose track of the balance with that sensuousness, what serves, what fulfills. And so it's really important to us to get a sense of and learn how to work with both of these forces. Now, I would like to share an activity with you, and it has to do with values. It's going to answer two questions. The first question will be, what drives you? And the second question, where are you going? Understanding values can really simplify a life. I'm going to share an exercise, and what's required here is a pen, a couple of sheets of paper, and a surface on which to write. So let's take a moment and get the materials that are needed. On this piece of paper at the top, create 3 columns. The first column is labeled essential. The second column, variable. And the third column, not interested. I'm going to be reading a list of values, and I'm going to read through it fairly quickly so that as the decision is made as to what column it goes in, there's really not a lot of time to think about it. It's spontaneous. It's really heartfelt. The list that I read is about 25% of the values that are available. And should you have a desire to hear and go through the whole thing, I invite you to email the address that you'll see on the screen, and then you can have the complete list. Let's get started. When you hear a value, you're going to put it in the column that you think it applies. Security, leading, action, excellence, risk, beauty, sharing, independence, stability, time alone, adventure, equality, strength, relationships, respect, group membership. Take a look at the column that we labeled essential. This represents the values of greatest importance. There's likely going to be more than one listed there at this time. Choose the one that seems most important. Put a number 1 beside it, and then with the others, group them in order of priority. The second most important, the third, and the fourth. We're going to take a look at the most important, the number 1, and there are 4 questions that we're going to consider. Here's the first question. Think of a time when you experienced this value. Now, I'm going to use an example of my own. I'm going to look at independence. The first time, or the most vivid memory I have of independence, is when I went to Guadalajara, Mexico, to study one summer. 2, describe the event. While I was in Guadalajara, I had the opportunity to, with my limited budget, take a third-class train to Mexico City. I did so with one of my companions from the house where I lived, and we had quite the adventure. 3, what element stands out? Well, for me, the element that stood out was freedom. I was in a new country, in a new city, with someone I hadn't known for very long, and I had the opportunity to discover myself, who I am, what I enjoy in a whole new way. 4, payoff. What element is of key importance here? Well, I realize that in exploring this new place and all of this freedom, I actually got to the heart of my authenticity. Who am I really, without the influence of family, friends, and familiarity? When we review the value that we've just taken a look at, and we come down to the underlying essential nature, we actually come to the heart of the value. For me, independence reduces to authenticity. There's a lot to be learned about our values and what's really important. I hope that you enjoy this experience and take time to go through the other values that you've listed in the essential column to find what's underlying those in the way of treasures. Enjoy.